Hello, can you hear me? Ground control, Major Tom. I wonder what the symbolism is with that. Ground control to Major Tom. James. It never gets it never gets old, does it? It is quite comical every time how unbelievably useless Skype's 1997 synchronization is. It's just like, and actually it's so appropriate to the topic at hand, isn't it, as well? Because we were going to talk about like products that we use, but we shouldn't use them, but we still use them.
The things that should be offering solutions, but yeah, this seems to be a bit of a problem app. It's like you don't know what it's going to do. It's just very unpredictable. It's sometimes the video doesn't work, sometimes the fucking microphone doesn't work.
Do you think it's intentional, like from the idea of not the technical aspect, which for sure is intentional, obviously, like selling people age-old technology as a mechanism by which to increase the divide between those that have and those that don't, the latter being ourselves. But I often think there's also like that psychological aspect where they want to keep people perpetually on the edge in fear, which is of course what they do with the media, you know, constantly talking about mass shootings and whether your kids are going to get jabbed, whether your country's going to be bombed, whether you're going to get raped on the street, all this kind of stuff. It's to keep people nervous and anxious like 24 hours a day.
Oh, absolutely, because, you know, they have the capacity to give us things that work fantastically, efficiently. It's where they drip feed us, you know, technology. And it's just definitely to keep us on the edge. Like they feed off of our fear. Like that fear, that low vibration is something that they feed off of, and they kind of transcend that into other things. I've already got like a big fucking fear machine that sucks up all the low vibrational frequencies that then makes up some kind of synthetic crystalline form of adrenochrome that they flip in, add to their, I don't know, their blood champagne or whatever the fuck they drink.
Well, if they don't drink that, we should trademark that, because that is a great name and that is something that they'd certainly buy if they haven't already got it. Blood champagne. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like a cocktail. And you'd have blood orange, wouldn't you? You'd have blood orange, obviously champagne.
Yep,
and
you've got a Bloody
maybe
Mary, you know.
That's true. Bloody Mary named after, I assume, Mary Queen of Scots. You got a heady chop chop. I think that's what I don't know if that's correct. Silas might know. Silas is Scottish.
I will look into that.
Yeah, I think we should.
Where does the term Bloody Mary come from?
I've also got my laptop next to me. I could just Google that. In the meantime, I guess we'll just give our appreciation to Silas, who shared our videos, which we've only just uploaded to YouTube, because to be honest, we were not, am I right in saying we were not confident that they'd all be accepted by YouTube, because obviously YouTube's a policy of chivalry and removing anything that might I wouldn't say everything that might kind of pursue the truth, but it's certain truths that are obviously blacklisted, and I think we touch on some of them. And to be honest, there probably will come a point where we forget that we should perhaps talk about certain topics on YouTube, and we'll probably end up getting banned. But that's just the way it is, isn't it? That's just life, and it's good to stay true to one's ideals and pursue that narrative. And you came up with a video name, didn't you, for this, which I've literally forgotten in the last 5 minutes. What was the name of this video?
Well, it was solutions to predictions. So
was that it?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, solutions
to predictions. And seeing what we think, what we predict is going to happen, what probably will happen, and offering solutions to it, like what to do, if forward planning, forward thinking, being proactive. Because it's nice to brainstorm this stuff and ponder, but it's going to come to a point when we're going to have to find a solution, because we've lived through real shit. We've lived through some real oppression, although somewhat comfortable. I mean, everything's relative, right? Because going through lockdown might not have been as bad as going through, say, World War II, for example, but it was still, a major planned event by I'll say the globalists, the elitists, because there is no globe per se. Even that term globalist reinforces an enormous lie. But yeah, the the royalty, the cabal, the elites, many other words, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them,
And the
uh,
etymology of those are quite interesting as well, aren't they? You've got the cabal after the Kabbalah, I assume, and then you've got elite, which is light, enlightened ones, right? The
exactly,
idea that knowledge is ultimate power, and the safekeepers of said knowledge are those that will always have a greater advantage over all else other. But yeah, I agree with the topic is a good one. Practical application of knowledge. And again, kind of what is the purpose of seeking knowledge and absorbing it and retaining it if you're not going to apply it? So I think it's a very good topic.
absolutely. And just to add to your point of etymology, Illuminati, illumination, also kind
Yeah,
of
it's true.
goes in with the enlightened theme as well. Elite, like light bearers, and they're all Satanists, and Lucifer worship again is bearer of the light, Luciferians and worshippers of the light and sun worship. It's all linked.
You've just sparked something off as well. Just quickly, I'll throw in there. You said light bearer, one of the kind of iconic symbols utilized by a lot of international corporations, and is of course the kind of centerpiece of the preliminary stages to the Olympic Games is the torch bearing ritual. There's always you see that
Absolutely.
giant torch on so many companies.
Yep, and what happens with that torch? It gets passed around the world. The torch does this travel. I think for the London Games was like David Beckham that kind of did like the last leg of like the torch, and yeah, but it's
Hey, you just reminded me something again. Actually, bloody hell, we're on it. It's all the coffee, all the free coffee I've been drinking. That poison substance. On Lord of
absolutely
the Rings, the Two Towers, so the second one in the sequence. If you flash to the movie and they're holding, God, what's the name of the castle, the fortress called? I always forget. Helm's Deep, and remember, it's the orc evil torchbearer that breaches the defenses of Helm's Deep. He runs through the swarms of orcs that are being, bashed down with the elves' arrows and being completely slaughtered, and he runs under the wall and blows it up. He's the torchbearer that decimates essentially what one could call democratic or logical or moral society, because of course the idea is that the humans in that film, I guess, stand for kind of a sense of morality and discipline, and they're being crippled by this fucking swarm of disease parasitic individuals. I don't know if that's the right interpretation, but there is a torchbearer in that as well.
I think that probably is the right interpretation. All of that resonated with me as it fits the script, it fits the narrative, it sounds very it sounds like their methodology. Yeah,
There we
absolutely.
go.
I agree with that. Also, back to your point about the Bloody Mary cocktail, indeed, Mary, Queen of England and Ireland. It's it's named after her. That cocktail, indeed.
It's pretty sadistic, isn't it, to think about it? Like drinking a cocktail named after the beheading of a queen, and obviously like the redness of the drink being synonymous with the blood of her head.
Literally. Like, and it's funny. I'm looking at like Bloody Mary, and like she looks a bit like a man. Like in all of her portraits, they like to play with what's that word? Hermaphroditism, like Hermes,
Yeah,
because Hermes is another person that they worship for the same kind of like occultist reason. It's the polarity of male, female, and that's another thing. And she was also executed for heresy, so they say. I mean, whether this person even actually existed, obviously, given the time scale they say she existed, is questionable because, well, there was probably a reset between now and then, and it's possible that all of the timelines, prior to that reset, which was probably only a couple of hundreds of years ago, happened. And she lived between 1516 and 1558, which was, just shortly before what some people say were significant times, and after very alleged significant times, the Council of Nicaea, which I believe was like 1492, I think it was round about then when lots of historical changes were made, and lots of institutions were set up, especially these religious publishings and certain editions of books that are supposed to be that hold spiritual wisdom. But yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, predictions and solutions. No, shall we start with?
Which one should we go with first? Should we go with I mean, what we've just discussed then, I mean, is really just kind of the base of it all. I mean, it was a very brief overview of just one specific kind of topic, a kind of microcosm in the greater scheme of things, but it's still just as substantial as all else other, because it just, we live in an occultist world controlled by people that manipulate history. The time frame in which we live is, of course, completely fictional. Everything is a facade of a facade. To actually get to the truth, who knows if it's feasible? But what is the solution, I guess, to these events? Things that we know are absolutely true and all around us right now. The manipulation of society, corrupt Kabbalistic entities that control and govern pretty much all aspects of the normie's life. Normie's not meant as a derogatory term, but as a kind of representation of like how most people act from day to day, go about with their lives. So how do we get out of that prison, that matrix, whatever one wants to call it? What are some of the simple things that people can do to change their life for the better?
I mean, I would say that knowledge is power. So, I mean, the first thing is for people to understand like their position, or to know thy enemy. Like, people actually like have like favorite mainstream politicians. Like, yeah, by all means, I'm sure not every single politician is bad, but I bet you
I think they
I
are.
mean,
I think they are
no,
all bad.
no, I mean literally. I would say every single mainstream one, or every single one that's got to any kind of influential status in any known party, whether that's Lib Dem, Conservative, Labour, and that's just in England. But anybody who kind of gets a seat where they can actually make any kind of influence, whether it's local or national, it's just not possible. I mean, yeah, that system's completely and utterly controlled. So I think if people opted out of that, I mean, obviously the people could say there's a double-edged sword that, if I don't vote, then then they'll just choose who they want. Well, they choose who they want anyway, and this is what people don't understand. And no matter who you choose, the plan goes ahead. It's like literally like pick your poison. It's like, if you was
That's a
to
nice T-shirt as well, by the way. We need to open up this T-shirt store. Like, I
literally
keep thinking about these things. Pick your poison. What was the other
pick
one?
your
Tribes and vibes.
yeah, your vibe attracts your tribe.
Ah, nice. By the way,
Um,
I just want to throw in. I just realised I'm sitting next to room 30 in the hotel. It's just complete by coincidence. It's room 30,
and
a
you
magic
said
number.
that at 1848 in the UK, which is 66. Just saying. But once again,
Oh
this
my
just
god!
shows how how much we're tapped in. And it's
But
funny.
it's big. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I actually had an epiphany about this the other day. So like we're talking about, that these numbers that people like, obviously these numbers are implanted deliberately, but they're also organic in their occurrence, because there are patterns, and obviously numbers essentially are something created, but they're a useful tool for quantifying things. It's a perceptive quantifier that helps humans to rationalize and gauge quantity of things. That's what numbers are. They can be used to, it's just like a perceptive tool, but the basis of our realm is indeed 666, and I'll tell you why. We're living in like a carbon-based era, and I believe before we lived in like a silicon-based era or silica-based era. S was kind of detailed in Illuminated Illusions, which is a really interesting
Oh yeah,
series.
exceptional series, exceptional series.
I mean, if you guys can find that, it wouldn't be on YouTube, but I think what was it Rumble or something
I
like that?
think
We
I
saw it.
think I think I watched it originally on Rumble. I think you linked it to me, but afterwards I think it's on Vimeo or Daily. What's that really old
Daily
school videos?
Motion.
Daily Motion. Good God, that's an interesting streaming service, isn't it? Because I think that's been around since I was a little boy,
Oh
and
no,
it
it
doesn't
really
seem to
has.
have
Yeah.
progressed at all. Like it hasn't expanded. Every other video streaming service in the world has come and gone, has reached the peaks of kind of like monetary enterprise, billions of dollars in revenue, disappeared like MySpace or Bebo or whatever they are. But Daily Motion's always just been there in the background, just consistently average. Very
I think
strange.
I think it's like the French version of YouTube. I think like it's a French owned company. I don't know why, but I think it's a French owned company. That's
Daily
my
Motion.
guess.
Well, the French do
It,
like having their own little things, don't they? Away from the rest of
yeah.
us. Yeah. But yeah, I can buy that, but
But
I'll have to cross check that later.
but yeah, so I carry on. So we're a carbon based life forms. Everything is carbon based, like so like the atoms contained 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. And many people say that this is why, they're held the number, because these people understand science, they understand spirit or metaphysics, for lack of a better term, but kind of like the things that are unseen that exist, frequencies, molecules, quarks, yeah, molecular science, all of these things they understand. So it would make sense because we know that everything is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So it would make sense for these numbers to constantly be found, like 666. It's like the Fibonacci sequence and all of these things. It's like and pi. These things, it's like when you look at a leaf, the ratio of a leaf normally relates to the length of the branches, and then the stump, and then the rings in the bark, and then the rings inside the actual trunk of the tree. There's like a mathematical relation to that. So for us, the fact that we're literally made up of atoms, like everything is made of that. A table is made of the same atoms that we are, essentially. It's just that there's different density to these things that express themselves in different ways. And people have probably heard the term that everything is hollow. Anybody who's kind of like looks into science, over the years would probably have heard of the fact that, well, in essence, everything is hollow because atoms essentially have space in between them, yet somehow they combine to create things that seem solid. Anyway, I digress. My point was is that 666 is literally the basis of everything. So we just think of 666 as this unlucky, satanic, demonic number, when actually 666 is literally the basis of our existence. And this is why we see threes, sixes, nines. 33 could be an expression of that. We know that 33 is a very is a is a very important milestone in the Freemasonic, fraternity. So yeah, understanding that may understand why we see these numbers anyway.
Well, with that, I would completely agree that the numbers themselves in numerology that we see everywhere, including sat next to me right here, right now, at 30, is a result of there being some intrinsic value to those number sets. Otherwise, the cabal wouldn't utilize them. But as we can acknowledge with that, there is also an artificial element to it. I mean, we can get into a whole debate about what even is, how do you define artificial? What is organic? Because this is kind of that ultimate philosophical wormhole where we can't really get to an end. Can we? Who knows?
Chicken or egg, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, they apply those numbers to every aspect of our life. If you flick on the news, or you go on Google rather, and you type in like mass shootings or death, or a number of cows that died yesterday, more than often you're going to get those numbers, and they're artificially implanted. I believe for the most part, artificially implanted. But the problem is if we start to kind of differentiate between those things, kind of the social science and the raw science, we're actually validating science as a whole, which is a kind of matter, a subject area that's been bolstered by the very same such satanic individuals that govern the world to create and to delineate between the two, to give this notion to people that somehow science is kind of undisputable, it's above that which is godly and spiritual, and as such it's the ultimate, it's the truth, it's their truth, because their truth is a falsity really. So the extent to which things like atoms and kind of protons and all these things actually exist, again, that's another kind of core debate, isn't it? That's another debate which is as wormhole-ish as the whole kind of philosophy of man and being and existence. This is the problem. Like, what can we believe? I mean, all the things like they just come up with, the world was created in X number of days, the Big Bang. It's all bollocks. It's all bullshit. I mean, the human beings, no matter how intellectually capable they might be, no matter how sadistic, no matter how bright, and to what ability, the kind of the higher, more affluent, most knowledgeable individuals might have above all else other, is still so limited to the point where it's just not feasible, even if they were the ultimate brain and mind, to kind of determine the origin of even the smallest aspect of our existence. It's all literally just BS. I would just quickly say, as a cut-in, that if anyone's got any issues with our Skype, because as we introduce the video with Skype as shit, it is getting a bit sporadic, and I don't know how it's going to sound when it gets uploaded. But if anyone has any recommendations, I've asked a few YouTubers actually, and other people I know, if there's a software perhaps that they use that might be more accurate, more reliable rather, do let us know. I just thought I'd tap in just because I hear certain interferences, and who knows. But returning back to the idea, as James said, of the numerology being kind of the core of our lives. Each and every day we see these numbers affixed to every pattern, and for sure, there is validity to it. But I guess the question is, or should be, as we introduce the video, what is the solution to this? You talked about the politicians and how people still vote for such individuals, even though it seems so commonsensically ludicrous to people like ourselves and our audience, no doubt, who know and are fully aware that these people are just shilly puppets. They're nobodies. In the greater scheme of things, they have absolutely no value, and yet people still actually take the time to ponder whether they're going to vote blue or red, left or right, when they're all two wings of the same bird. It's actually mad. But the thing is, they're never going to be able to attain the knowledge to determine those truths unless there are other things in their lives which they change. And for me, I see the smallest things as the most, the most practical things as the most important. Everything is about small steps. And I know a lot of people in the audience probably are going to use these products, which I'm going to call out as I did. And, I still have a drink from time to time, or I have coffee, and I know things are very, very poisonous unless it's, your own bean from your own garden, or something that you've brewed yourself with the fruits from your tree. Things like, toothpaste with fluoride, beer off the shelf, something like Heineken or Stella, or Starbucks coffee. All of these things are poison. All of the products that you see in the supermarket, for the most part, are completely contaminated. And so long as people are consuming these things, they're not going to be able to develop that ingenuity and that kind of that kind of insight to be able to then combat the core motivation for change, which is, of course, the attainment of knowledge. It's those little things that are demoralizing our brain, that are poisoning us, funneling toxins through our bloodstream that are preventing us from having that spark in the morning, that so-called eureka moment when we can wake up and think to ourselves, you know what, I'm going to read this book for a change. And from that book comes another book. And from that other book comes an awareness of things that certain people didn't have yesterday or last year. And it really changes the persona, but it all derives from being biologically healthy to a large degree, being disciplined with your mentality and deciding to eat 2 apples instead of 1, deciding to take the peel off the apple, deciding to mix that apple with some honey, and all these little things will lead to that change. And that's the take I have on kind of creating a core solution.
That resonated. It's so true. It gave me goosebumps. Absolutely. It's like almost exclusively the people that are more aligned with progressive truth tend to have a kind of understanding of self and a healthy level of self-worth. And when you have self-worth and you value yourself and you have knowledge of yourself, you tend to make different choices about the things that you ingest. And it's no coincidence that pretty much everybody who I know who didn't take the jab is also somebody who is, generally health conscious. I mean, like you said, John, it's like, of course, from time to time, we may, have a beer or a Snickers bar or something, or you stay at a bird's house and she doesn't have, like, fluoride-free toothpaste, so you use the tiniest little bit of her Colgate and it's fucking poison. And you're like, oh my God, but I need to, but my breath smells, so I've got to flip and do it. Just make sure you don't swallow any, reach your mouth out. Really, And I'm literally, I've got a little bit of a sore throat at the moment because I used a little bit of fluoridated toothpaste the other day, and like the day after, I got a sore throat, like from gargling with it. Absolutely, and that's what you get. That is what you get. So yeah, absolutely. Just like the small things, caring about your produce, just knowing that literally there is a war against you. The supermarkets are against you. Ultra processed food is being used to slowly kill you deliberately. And just that in itself is a good start. Education, just looking into things that aren't, from the status quo. And even then, like, you've got all of this nonsense. I know these people that talk about, aliens and Bigfoot, but, and it's funny because that can also, kind of like mislead people, but at least you're not necessarily following, something that's, seen as like the status quo. But even now they're pushing alien agendas.
Oh God, yeah, it flashed up on my phone this morning actually. Something like NASA received message from 10 million miles away or something ridiculous like that. And it's that narrative that we all predicted years ago. And I think people like whether or not he's a shill, that's up for debate.
Bill Cooper.
I always forget his name. Bill Cooper predicted the exact same thing in the 80s, 70s. It's so predictable because it's the same system. It's the same system they use every reset. It's called a reset because it goes back to day one, and it's the same narrative that's reimplanted onto the new society, albeit with some change of aesthetic, different characters, different roles. But the core essence of what they are doing is what they did before and before that and before that. And that's why it's so easy to predict many aspects of what's coming because they've already happened.
So to sum up, like, the solution to maybe just like getting on the right path would be to care about yourself, care about your health, research things that are good for you. Don't take fluoride. Don't take deodorants with aluminum in it and things like this, and all of these neurotoxins. All of these things are neurotoxins. They're designed to kind of get in your bloodstream and stop you thinking right, and to affect your behavior and to affect your offspring's behavior. Stop ingesting those, and like Jonathan said, like, read a book, read something with truth, listen to things that contain truth, and
But that's where we need to expand, because that's one of the main problems. When people do get to the point where they might think to themselves, "Oh, I want to buy a book," or I'm interested in what I just saw on the TV or whatever, and they want to make that leap, that step. They might go off to WH Smith, which for non-UK listeners is just a big, essentially like a book retailer, right? But all these book retailers are owned by the same publishing houses, and the publishing houses censor what material is put on their shelves. So if you take big retailers in the UK that sell books and specialize in education, like Foyles or WH Smith or Waterstones, everything that they sell conforms atypically to the narrative that you'd expect to see on, let's say, BBC News or Fox News or CNN. It's the same bullshit. In their front shelves, they have some racially motivated title of a book. They have something on Israel and Palestine. They have something on LGBT. They have all the same nonsense that you'd expect to see anywhere else. And that's the problem. Just because something is physical and it's synonymous with historical kind of knowledge and people like Plato and all the kind of Socrates of the world that people associate with intellectual endeavor, they're actually just as poisonous perhaps as the TV. Just because they're physical and they have that nice papery feel and it smells good, it doesn't make it any better. The thing is, it's about finding the what's the word I'm looking for? It's the retailer that's important. So, for example, if you go on archive.org, archive.org is essentially a website which is saving a lot of data throughout the World Wide Web's history, where you're able to access newspaper articles that perhaps been banned or removed from the actual newspapers themselves, the websites themselves. And, you can find anything going back, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, decades and decades. But you'll also find books that used to be readily available on said shelves and said stores 20, 30 years ago, but have now been removed because they don't conform to that said narrative. And it's a really, really good resource. That's the word I was looking for, resource. It's absolutely perfect. Archive.org. And you can type in all kinds of books that have been censored, that have been banned for being obscene or offensive, which, as we know, is often not the case. If they are branded as obscene and offensive, they're usually the kinds of materials that you want to get your hands on, because it gives people a different insight. I'm not saying it's always right, and I'm not saying it's always not obscene and offensive, but as James said earlier, just because someone believes in, Bigfoot and fairies and all this kind of stuff, which right now in my life I personally don't follow, but I appreciate the fact that people are taking a different stance and having that different outlook on society, because it's all got to begin somewhere. If I take myself 10, 15 years ago, even less than that, every day I'm making changes with my mentality. And there are things that I believed all that time ago and I look at now and I think, good God, that's ridiculous. And I'm sure we all have the same thing. So what's important is to recognize that if you're doing something and reading something, doing whatever that other people generally aren't doing, that in itself is valuable.
I'll tell you what a good start would be. This is somebody who's mainstream, who's a shill, but who also disseminates a lot of truth. David Icke.
Yeah.
In terms of the way he narrates on the political structure and hierarchy, down to a T. Council of Foreign Nations, Committee of 300, Bilderberger Group, Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, World Economic Forum, all of those official real world narrative things, he has more or less spot on. But the genius of his existence is that he undermined the truth movement by adding things to it, like, I don't know, Queen Elizabeth was a lizard, and I don't know, Earth was created by a collision with Mars, and there's shape-shifting reptilians everywhere, and and all of this fucking absolute improvable nonsense. And this is why he's not. This is why he's alive. This is why he sells out like the Royal Albert Hall and like Wembley Arena. And, like, this is why he went on the Terry Wogan show, and like this is why he's literally a celebrity. And obviously he's been deplatformed after he's got a platform of millions of followers already. After he's already a millionaire as a result. The guy used to work for the BBC. That kind of says it all. So he was like, he had his perfect grounding. He's also part of said bloodline, which I won't say, but he has the right historical makeup, let's say, as everybody that's at the top of
top of the leaderboards.
seems to have. And those who know will just between the lines of what I'm saying. So yeah, that just in terms of understanding how the political structure came to be, he would be a good person to, because just forget all like the fairy hocus pocus stuff, and just focus on like the political aspect. And his stuff is readily available. There's one book of his called The Biggest Secret that, yeah, you can pick quite a few gems out of just to understand, what it is we're living in politically. And then, hopefully your own intelligence and discernment can, lead you to other truths from there. Another thing is a restriction. I mean, we're seeing like constant restrictions on, our liberties. I mean, we've spoken already about 15-minute cities, and there's these like all these kinds of like unfair stealth taxes that have been imposed, ULEZ, congestion charge, toll charges for going through tunnels that takes you to the other side of town, and just for going over a bridge, like you're being charged, and all of this stuff is like government funded, and it's really been paid for with taxpayers' money, but somehow you're being taxed for it again. It's like literally daylight robbery. I mean, the prediction, it's not even a prediction, that we know it's actually forecast for more of these stealth taxes to be introduced. So solution to that would be non-conformance, not to pay. And it wouldn't take a majority to not pay. It would just take a sizable minority for it to work. So let's just say 20%, which is what I would call a sizable minority. Let's just say, for example, there are 60 million people in England. There's probably more, but let's just say there's 60 million people in England. 20% of that is 12 million. 12 million people who do not comply feasibly. They could not process the admin. They couldn't process all the letters. The courts would be able to handle it. And, if those 12 million people, just silently did not come, silent non-compliance, you don't need to go out on the street and riot and protest. Just literally do not conform and do not comply. I think if it got to a stage where people actually united, people actually cared enough about their fellow, brethren, their fellow compadres enough, because, I care about Sally around the corner, I care about Rob up the road, I care about, Vikesh and, Raja down the street, I care about everybody. And if everybody, regardless of, religion, and all of these other things that divide people, actually just saw the common enemy, which essentially are the elitists, the cabal, and saw that essentially everybody's their victim. There might be like some kind of like mild hierarchy in terms of how they divide us socially, but everybody is their victim. Everybody. And if people saw that, I think it'll be easier to kind of unite and take affirmative action. And it doesn't have to be destructive or loud. In fact, sometimes, I mean, silence is better than violence. I think that's another T-shirt there, isn't it? Yeah.
That's one that would be printed, although I prefer violence is better than silence, which wouldn't be printed. But
I'll tell you what. I mean, listen, we can market to the pacifists and the warmongers alike.
Indeed, absolutely. What I would say to that, though, is I think about the idea that somehow it's feasible to overthrow. I actually think that's what happens every reset, and I think the reset is a tool used by the status quo, by the cabal, whomever, to overthrow once they realize that it's reached a point where that is a necessity. Because realistically, they wouldn't need to reset if their system was ultimate. If it was feasible not to reset, to not have to go through this process continuously every different age of restarting themselves, then they would do that because that's logically more efficient. The reason they have to reset is because it reaches a boiling point where their system fails, where it comes back down on itself, where people become more aware. And they have the analytical capacity to measure every kind of thought process that we have. And when it reaches that peak, then boom, it's put back into place where we're kind of serfs in a feudal village once again.
It's like there's a part of me. I hear people saying this, that people are waking up, but it's like I drive down. I mean, I drive every day. I drive around London every single day, and like and like more and more people are conforming. It's like the roads that used to be like 30 miles an hour and 40 miles an hour, and now 20 miles an hour speed limit. And like, and people are so brainwashed. It's like even when the road is like a 30-mile-per-hour road, people are driving 20 miles an hour because they've been conditioned. And it's like it's just making everybody's brain move slower. It's like I'm not
But
sure.
this is why there are individuals in the world that have changed behaviors very easily, very readily within a matter of seconds. And those are the individuals that get sparked off, they get shot, they get executed, they get suicided, whatever, because it is actually feasible to change people's perception of right and wrong and to stop people from adhering to these value sets and driving 20 miles an hour. But the thing is, people will never do it unless they're in a group. It's that mob mentality which we always see prevails, whether it's people being charged in a football game or in any scenario, because we're naturally social beings where there is this kind of outbreak of thought process, expression. People are more willing to get together and act if they're together. It's almost a survival instinct. No one wants to put themselves forward unless they're backed up by their neighbors. And actually, I experienced this firsthand once, and it's I would say one of the top three most important things in my life that I recognize. The first most important thing I think I've discussed with you before, which was the substitute teacher I had, his history teacher when I was a secondary school student, and she said, always question the source, something so simple, but for whatever reason, it just sparked off in my brain. And from then on, I always questioned everything. That's something that's really important, I remember. Another thing was I attended this wanky London hipster protests, like most protests are, when I was at Goldsmiths in New Cross, and it's your atypical people turn up with stupid signs and artworks and puns and whatever and pretend they actually care about whatever's happening. I think it was teachers' salaries being revoked or reduced or something along the lines of that, pensions, I think. And I climbed up on a wall. This was where Westminster is. There's a little wall on a window frame quite high. And I climbed up there. I was the only person up there. And I was very nervous. There was cameras flashing at me. People were looking. And then because I was up there, someone else got up. And then because two people were up, all of a sudden there's 3 people on the ledge, and then 5 people, and then 10 people. And all of a sudden there's a whole mob of us have climbed up just because one person acted. And that's all it takes. And they know that's all it takes. I'm not saying that's all it takes to overthrow them, because they're in such a strong position that's probably very unlikely. But they realize that the macro can lead, or the micro, sorry, can lead to the macro. The small that can become the big, which links into what we were discussing just now with respect to what is it that people can do to change their mentality in their life. It's those small changes. It's those daily, things, those day-to-day aspects. Not using fluoride, not using an aluminium-based or aluminum, for our American audience, based deodorant. Looking at the things like honey on the shelf and seeing, what else is inside, not drinking certain milks, making sure that all those little things become a big thing. And that big thing is what will spark something different in your life that might change someone else's life. And again, because we're all electrical beings, perhaps we're certainly all, aligned and linked in accordance to energies. What we do can change what our neighbor does. And even this podcast is a very tiny example. In fact, again, another link. Earlier we had a few subscribers join because another YouTuber shared this content, and that's just, it shows that every little thing, it's a tiny thing, but it means that some people listening now might not have seen the channel before, very, very likely, and they might then recommend it to a friend. We might recommend their channel. These kinds of things. It's the same with the food produce. It's the same with the toothpaste. It's the same with books, with newspapers, with holiday destinations. Every aspect of a social living space environment is orientated around, being social, being that change, being that movement, sharing that information. And I think that's the best thing we can take from these conversations. It's, what's the purpose of knowledge unless it's applied, utilized? That's the purpose of this very episode. What was it called again, James? I've forgotten the name again. Terrible memory.
Solutions to predictions.
Solutions to predictions, or solutions and predictions, either or.
Yeah, either or. But essentially, we're talking about predictions of what's to come, things that are very likely to happen, and potential solutions to them. And that the last point that you made there was very profound and poignant. Thank you for that.
By the way, the either or would make a nice t-shirt. Again, mate, we need to work on this t-shirt shop. Either or, and then you could have someone of a dubious gender or sex on the front of the t-shirt.
I'll tell you what, just have the face of Bloody Mary on there, because I'll tell you what, I can't tell you if this is a man or a bloke, a man or a woman.
That's true. Or you could have Lady Gaga with her arm around Barack Obama's wife with two distinct bulges.
Perfect. Also, a slight mistake I made earlier on. So Bloody Mary, the reason why she's called Bloody Mary is because the amount of people that she executed, actually.
Oh, really?
She executed hundreds of, Protestants at a time that, opposed her rule and, and stuff like that.
According to the narrative, that is.
According to the official narrative. Yeah, absolutely.
So what goes around comes around then. I guess that's justice, ironically, assuming it was correct, which it might not well be, or might not be. But either way, I guess that would make a nice T-shirt too. Wasn't she red-headed as well? Nice ginger lady on the front.
I'm looking at a picture of her now. It's like somewhat browny, coppery, maybe. Yeah. Hard to say. She's got like a little veil thing on her head, but it could be. She's quite pale, like a typical kind of like redhead kind of get up.
I just thought of another T-shirt design, James. We could go on and on about these T-shirts, but this one is really fucking great. So imagine someone, she's got a ponytail, and imagine a big strong hand grasping a ponytail, a head completely disconnected from the corpse after the beheading, and then the blood dripping down into a cocktail glass, and then underneath it says Bloody Mary?
Bloody Mary.
Oh,
there you go.
There we go. And perhaps his other hand, the executioner's other hand, is sprinkling the pepper into the glass. So he's got one hand grasped on a ponytail, drawing the head from its disconnected body. The other hand is sprinkling that pepper into the glass, because you always have pepper with Bloody Mary, don't you? Or is it Tabasco? I'm thinking Tabasco. It's pepper and Tabasco, isn't it? You have Bloody Mary's vodka, tomato juice, pepper and Tabasco, isn't it?
Yeah. That's it. Let me Bloody Mary ingredients. Let's see.
I'm sure our audience are fascinated. And if you are to drink vodka, audience, make sure it's something naturally brewed in someone's garden.
So it's 3 parts vodka, 1 part lemon juice, 6 parts tomato juice, a sprinkle of pepper, a sprinkle of salt, and a dash of Tabasco.
There we go. Lovely.
There's also a variant that has Worcestershire sauce as well, but
yeah, you're right. And actually, the Worcestershire I can't say that. Try saying that 5 times. Tongue twister. The Worcestershire sauce option is actually delicious. I have had that. I think I might even prefer it to the traditional.
Next time I go out, I'm gonna have a Bloody Mary in homage to this store. Absolutely.
And on that note, should we let our audience go? I'm sure they're sick of us already, and we can all move on with our lives.
Yeah, we've gone past our average time. Thank you once again for listening. Please do continue to share our content, comment, give us suggestions. If you can find a better thing for us to record on, please let us know. And until then,
likewise. All the best, and I'll speak to you later, James. Bye.
Indeed. See ya.